Today we're talking about, you guessed it, Mulan again. Mulan is not on the PTS yet because the PTS is not up yet, but we have a lot of interesting information surrounding Mulan and we have a lot of numbers that we can look at, and I've already started with that. So that's what we're going to look into today. But before we do that, a quick update from Isaiah, who posted this. Hey guys, just wanted to bump this in case anyone missed this info regarding Mulan's visuals. Today's update show was actually pre-recorded on Monday before your comments started rolling in, so feedback will not be directly addressed on stream. We hear your feedback and we have an update from our design and art teams to provide more context for you in the next couple days. Also, if you haven't already, we encourage you to read our closer look blog for Mulan. So there is an update that will provide more context. I'm not entirely sure if that means there's an update that will actually change something about her design, or if it's just more that they're going to update us on their creative process. But I do think it sounds like they're thinking of doing something about it at least. And I really hope that they're considering to either make some minor changes or release the alternative version, because it was very much liked by a lot of people. It would be a bit foolish not to, in my opinion. But yeah, I wanted to give you that update beforehand. And now we're going to look at Mulan's numbers. So I read a lot of talk about Mulan's numbers already, discussing if she's too strong, if she's too weak, if she's completely broken, blah, blah, blah. And I wanted to put that all in perspective. I wanted to see, okay, what does Mulan really have? How good are her numbers? What's strong about a kid? What's maybe weaker about a kid? And that's exactly what we're going to start here today, or with this part, and we're gonna open up some things here later on, and you'll see a lot of other gods, so we have a good frame of reference. But first, for Mulan herself. Now, what you have to keep in mind here with all of these numbers is they are at level 20 at max skill of each ability. If you're not aware yet, Mulan's abilities level up the more you use them, and with that they get additional effects. So for example, the 1 has 3 instances of damage in late game, but only 2 in early game. So this number would be lower if we're looking at early game. Or the 2 only has the 260 base damage at the start, and then later gets the second instance with a longer range, and also gets an additional damage effect if you hit an enemy twice with that. So a lot of things that shift throughout the game, and a lot of numbers that increase over time. But we are looking at the final late game status to see what the maximum damage output here really is. If you're looking at the base damage of the 1, we have 465, which is quite a fair bit already, plus 90% scaling. The 2 has 600 base damage and 0.85 or 85% scaling. This only applies if you hit it all on the same target, as that's a specific bonus damage effect. The third ability has a little less damage, 350. Also 2 parts here, confirming the damage on the enemy and then connecting with them, and a scaling of 0.7. And last but not least, the ultimate has 930 base damage altogether with a scaling of 150%. So quite crazy numbers here. Just for reference, I can bring them up real quick because they sound quite crazy. Here's 320, 260, and 350, and then we have all the scalings here as well. So quite a lot together. And that obviously leads to relatively high numbers if we combine it all as well. If we're looking at the combo without the ult, so just a 1, 2, 3, we have 1415 damage plus 245% scaling. With the ultimate included, we have 2345 base damage and 395% scaling. However, that is not quite all. We also have to factor in that cooldown is a thing. Some gods have lower damage but shorter cooldowns. Mulan's cooldowns are definitely towards the longer side here, with 45 between the 3 abilities without the ultimate and another 100 on the ultimate itself. It's worth noting though that her passive allows her to take off 2 seconds of cooldown of one ability, so realistically the cooldown is 40 seconds in most situations between the 3. You also have to factor in that she has 5% extra power in late game, which directly affects the scaling as well. And if we correct the scalings for that, then we would have 257% scaling without the ultimate and 415% scaling with the ultimate. quite a decent number for a warrior for sure. We also have to have a quick look at the basic attacks here, which I had to check first. I had to find out what actually was up with them. I initially thought they were like 1.1.2 or something. I looked into it. It's 1.1.25. If we compare this here, that adds up. I verified this with Clumsy as well, and he confirmed this for me. So both the swing time and the damage that comes with it is 1, 1, and then 1.25 in an AoE swing. So thanks very much to Clumsy for confirming this. And also, if you're interested in more details on that, Clumsy said he will give me some more details later on about the exact swings, because it looks like third swing might be a little bit quicker and have a longer post animation, which would be very effective for attack cancels. So you could use 3 quick swings and then use an ability, and you'd cancel out of the rest of the slow animation. He will tell me more about Twitter about that on Twitter. So feel free to follow me there at DukesClothTV and follow Titan Clumsy as well, and then you will see when he posts the update, so you'll know about that. So before we look at the other gods, I want to show you some things that are important to be aware of when it comes to Mulan, and that is about the motion, basically. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger here. This is just the little clip that I had today from my gameplay, and here you can, or from the gameplay, and here you can see that Mulan has these normal swings. But what's also interesting is that with this kit, this is the part where she roots herself, but all the other abilities, the 1 and the 2 and the ultimate, don't have much of a root. The ultimate has a root after the first part is confirmed. After the enemy is rooted, you get a self root, and then you can knock them up and deal more damage. But everything else that you can see here is just very smooth. You can just walk around during any part of it, and that's very, very important, because normally most abilities have some sort of self-slow, or many abilities have some sort of self-slow, self-root, when they are very strong and very impactful. Think especially you got like King Arthur, and that's not really much the case for Mulan. It is the case for the 3, but that makes a lot of sense. That's similar to Naja Sash. With most of the other parts here, you just get a very high amount of mobility during your fight when using your abilities, and that of course has an impact on your damage output as well. What you can see here as well are the basic attacks. I think they're going to show it in just a second. No, this is a slower one. Okay, now. So 2 quick basic attacks, and then no, never mind, not yet. Here. Yeah, there you can see this third basic attack comes out very quickly after the others, even though it's actually a higher damage one. And I think the animation just ends up being slower afterwards, which would definitely have an impact on how strong Mulan will be in terms of attack canceling. And you would often want to use your entire basic attack chain before you use the next ability. Depends if that's actually going to be the case. But I think it's worth noting for damage output as well, because some of the other gods that we look at don't really have the same level of basic attack implementation in general. And we also have to factor in some other things with Mulan, but we'll get to that. Now, let's look at another god first, and for that, we first have Hercules. I'm not going to read out all the different values that we have here, but what you can see overall is that his damage, without the ultimate, between the 2 damaging abilities that he has, is 625 base and 140% scaling on a 28-second cooldown. So if he had another ability that was the same damage and the same scaling, then he would still not get close to Mulan, and he would still end up around the same cooldown as well. So definitely less damage output. And even if we factor in the ultimate, which is a very high damaging ultimate, it does not come close to Mulan's. It is, first of all, it's in a smaller area, even though it's safer, of course, and it can go over walls, so there's benefits there, but it's a smaller area from what I can tell, and it's a single instance here without CC that can bounce back and then deal more damage, but in most circumstances, you will definitely get more damage out of Mulan's ultimate, and you will definitely get more team fight potential of Mulan's ultimate as well. With Hercules, however, you also see here again that he has a lower cooldown on his ultimate, and there's a passive that gives him a power buff when he gets hit, so that is something that I didn't factor in here, because you can't really put the flat values and the scalings together and still get a reasonable result. So smaller factors in Hercules' favor, but overall significantly less damage output here than Mulan. The next one is Tyr. also one of the more damaging ability-based warriors. That's mainly the theme we're going to be looking at here. Ability-based physical characters, because that is, I think, where Mulan fits in mostly. And with Tyr, we can see that the damage output gets closer at least. We are at 1190 base damage here with 280% scaling. And with the ultimate, we have 1640 base damage and 400% scaling. Still, way less than Mulan though. On the other hand, Tyr, for example, is somebody who has more sustain and arguably more effectively usable CC depending on how the game goes. If you're more ahead and you can blink in and you can use your full CC, then you can turn a team fight with that. Whereas Mulan is safer with a single pick, basically. He also gets up to 50 power from his 3, so that's something we can also factor in depending on stance and everything. But yeah, again, details that I didn't want to get too stuck on. But in his case, for example, he has 33 cooldown between his abilities. That is factoring in that you use a stance swap in between. And that is obviously a fair bit less than Mulan, and that is something that you will notice in an extended fight as well. And the old cooldown also here is 70. Again, quite a bit lower than what we have with Mulan. And then we have Odin. Odin recently got a buff. He got some nerfs. The nerfs from the newest patch are factored into this. But still, he ends up with relatively high damage numbers. So he's at 1320 base damage. Very close to Milan here. Less than 100 base damage difference. At 259% scaling. That is the point where we can say, okay, damage-wise, these are similar. I think in most situations, Mulan will still do a little bit more damage, unless we're looking at pure damage scaling focus builds, but they're getting closer. But then Odin also kind of stops dealing damage at that point, because the only extra damage that he gets from his ultimate is if somebody leaps out of the ultimate. And even then, it's only 1740 with 334% scaling, which is way behind what Mulan has once again, because her ultimate does so much in terms of damage. Now, Odin's ultimate has other purposes. It's way more about control, so maybe it's not directly comparable. But again, Mulan offers control as well. But what we can also see with Odin here is that his combined cooldowns are only 32 seconds. So again, he will be able to use his combo a lot more often. He also gets extra power through his ultimate, depending if somebody dies and that and stuff. And then if teammates die and all the other shenanigans he has. So again, there are other benefits that play in his favor as well. But Mulan has other benefits too. I'm going to minimize these guys here so it doesn't get quite too cluttered. And I will hopefully find the right one. I think I may have just closed the wrong one. Let's see. Oh, it doesn't want to let them open anymore. Unfortunate. Oh, there we go. King Arthur. King Arthur is where it gets interesting. Because King Arthur is a god that has a ton of abilities that deal a ton of damage. Now, what we have to say is that these numbers for King Arthur are different from Mulan, highly optimistic. So what you have to keep in mind with King Arthur is he has to combo perfectly, basically. You have to do the knockup into the 1 to get the melee damage for the 1. You have to hit the 3 in the blue stance twice, which requires the enemy to path in a specific way and you to follow that way. And you have to hit all instances of your combo stance 3, which is super hard. So Mulan's numbers here are a lot more likely to happen. I don't want to say realistic, because all of these numbers are equally realistic, but these are just much harder to apply in a fight, especially also applying both ultimates in a fight. It's possible, it happens, but it's not that you always have that guaranteed. With Mulan, you can basically guarantee a kit as long as you don't miss the 3, essentially, and we'll see about the 2. Well, what we can see with the 2 even, as far as I can tell, you are able to move during the 2. I'm not sure if you're able to move quite as fast as with the 1 or with like normal movement speed. There's a minor penalty to running around using the 2 with a spear with Mulan. That may be a minor downside to her, but it's still not close to the self roots that King Arthur has in his kit. And that means for Mulan also that she has more opportunities to throw in basic attacks in between, because she will stick to the enemies better. And she gets movement speed for that as well. So with King Arthur, however, we do end up with 2,400 base damage and 405% scaling. And with the ultimate, everything included, we have, or not everything included rather, every base damage and scaling value included, we have 3080 damage and 580% scaling. But that's not even all, because we're not factoring in the protection shred that King Arthur gets from his spin, from his standard set spin. And we're not factoring in the percentage health damage from his ultimate. So he gets even more damage out of that. The total cooldown for all of his abilities is also 44 seconds, so it's not that far off from Mulan. The old cooldown is also just 20 seconds because King Arthur. And I think that's very interesting, right? With all the other warriors before, we saw significantly lower damage numbers, but also lower cooldowns. And here we see the opposite. We see way higher damage numbers than anything before. We also see higher cooldowns. But we also have to say that realistically, in the Conquest meta at the moment, King Arthur is not very favored. I know there are people that think King Arthur is very strong, and outside of Conquest that is often shown. But in the Conquest meta, he's just not doing all too hot. He's not terrible, but there are just better choices when it comes to solo lane especially. Could still make the argument that with these scalings and base values, you should actually run around the jungle anyways. But then you have the problem of not getting enough combo meter or not enough combo meter to get the ultimate or both of the ultimates often enough, and then you fall off the damage there. And the problem for King Arthur is also that he's consistently rooted, meaning that if he is squishy, if he's built for damage, then he's very easy to punish for that because he just stands still. And Mulan is basically, with the exception of the 3 and of the ultimate, the opposite. Her abilities keep her super mobile, keep her in the fight, let her chase around and do tons of damage and slow the enemy while doing so. So she gets this enticement to have a bit more of a hybrid playstyle, to throw in some basics in between, and to just make the fight work for her without having to worry too much about applying the perfect combo, because she's gonna get something on the enemy either way. So that if you see all the other numbers before, it gives you a bit of an impression of, oh my god, Mulan is completely OP, she's way stronger than everyone else. But on the other hand, we see here that King Arthur can, like, stat-wise be way stronger, or damage-wise be way stronger again, but still not end up being way stronger than all the other gods that we saw before in the game. Like, most people would not argue that at the moment, Odin is the stronger god than King Arthur, yet, performance-wise, stat-wise, King Arthur here, from these raw values, looks better. So that's something worth keeping in mind, and that's something I really wanted to highlight here, because I think it's going to be important when it comes to the conversation about Mulan's balance. And then I wanted to, for comparison's sake, also put in an assassin, and I put in Susano here. And what I found very interesting with Susano is his base damage is so much lower again. He's at 795 base damage with 325% scaling. So you see that the base damage is like little more than half, but then the scaling is also almost 100 more, like 80% more here. So assassins shift in that regard, but still, if we factor in the ultimate, then we see with Mulan, the base damage is still almost twice as high. We have 1,270 under Susano, but the scaling is actually not that far apart. He's at 395, he's at 450. You can also, or you also have to keep in mind that he has a passive added here. I have that in the calculations as well, so don't worry, I haven't forgotten about it. So that makes these numbers a little bit higher than what's shown here. But yeah, you can see that, again, Susano is also cooldown-wise very high here, 44 seconds, and his cooldown, a big teamfight ultimate, is actually 100 seconds as well, much like hers. So really, depending on what you look at and which angle you look at, you'll see very different performance stats in comparison, and it doesn't necessarily mean that from the stats alone we can say that she's completely broken or not. What I find very interesting to note and very important to note is all the additional effects that she gets. I have already mentioned them throughout, but I wanted to point them out again. She gets 5% attack speed from cross strike, but she also gets 25% attack speed for 4 seconds. And that is massive, especially for clearing as well. Especially since this is apparently this level of attack speed at rank 1. So even if you don't level this ability up, you get this. That means that you get more basics off, and more of these basics have the cleaves as well, which means your overall clearing speed is increased significantly. And your boxing is way better as well. And if you combine that with the spear thrust, especially if you lost some health before you had the healing, you slow the enemy for 2 seconds by 30%, allowing you to stick to them, throw out some basic attacks, use your 1, throw out some more basic attacks with the increased attack speed. And there's a lot of combo potential that you can use but don't have to use. And then again, you also have the grapple. Depending on which ability you decide to use first, you also get the reduced cooldown on it. So you can maybe use the cross strike twice, which goes down to 12 seconds of cooldown. And if you have cooldown reduction as well as that, you can pretty reliably use it twice because you'll have the spear thrust afterwards to slow someone, and then you will have the grapple to pull them back in. And here you also get the movement speed as well. And I think the ability to dash to walls is also something that shouldn't be underestimated. Of course, it's not a normal escape in that sense, but it can make for some interesting plays with positioning, especially if an enemy is close to the wall. You just try and grapple the enemy, and if you end up missing, you just grapple the wall instead and just pull close to them anyways. So a lot of interesting mechanics, and then there's also the fact that you have the slow, the stun, and here you have the knockup as well as the root, or the root and then the knockup. So a lot of mechanics that are going into here, a lot of effects that go beyond just an ability-based guard and a lot beyond what most ability-based guards are able to do on the regular, especially since she doesn't require the same positioning as, say, a Hercules or a Tyr. I guess, okay, Hercules can to some degree he can pull enemies in as well, but I would still say from what I can see so far, it's going to be easier with Mulan, because with Hercules you have this centered area with one spot where it really pulls in. With Mulan, if anyone is anywhere in the line, they get pulled in. This is obviously just the impression that I have so far. Like I said, it looks kind of like Najasash, and to me personally, Najasash is easier to hit than Hercules pull. Maybe other people see that differently anyways. But I think this is very cool. I think it's very interesting, and I'm very curious to see where she goes development-wise, balance-wise. But I also wanted to emphasize that based on these numbers, especially side by side with King Arthur, I wouldn't necessarily scream that she's inherently OP. You can also pull this up like this again, just to give you a bit of an overview, just to see where all the different gods are placed basically. So sound not that important anyways. And you will notice that there's such a heavy shift between these gods in terms of stats, yet they can perform on a very similar level, or sometimes the lower stats are the lower statted ones are performing better than the higher statted ones, often also depending on what level of utility they bring. And that, I think, is something where Mulan will shine. And if anything, what I'm expecting to be nerfed the earliest is the ultimate, because that still has a very, very, very high amount of damage and scaling, and also comes with a massive amount of CC at the same time. And it's also a very strong escape. So I wouldn't be entirely surprised if there's some tweaks to that. But yeah, that's all for Mulan so far. We will talk more about her once we can see her on PTS and can actually see how she's doing and how she feels there. And with that, thank you guys very much for watching. I hope this was interesting, insightful. If you're new to the channel, feel free to hit the sub button and maybe the bell so you get notified of any upcoming Mulan stuff as well. I will certainly make a build discussion for her and everything as well. And so far we can definitely say she wants cooldown reduction, especially since that also helps with the ability leveling. But anyways, with that, thank you guys very much for watching. I hope to see you all for the next one, probably tomorrow. Duke Sloth, out.